Hello, this is Luke, and we're back with another episode of building a self-hosted analytics service from scratch. Again, a bit of a schedule change, a bit of a studio change here. I actually moved again, so if anything's a little different, that's why. Let's go ahead and get started though. The more things change, the more they stay the same. We're going to get started by looking at our notes file. So the last time we worked on this, we kind of refactored this note into these different sections here. And we can just start by picking off one of these. I do really want to get to this deployment to fly option, but I haven't done the prep work to have that set up yet, which I can't do all of that on stream. So I think I'm going to start with something else today. And I feel like this more flexible look back window chooser is something that I've been wanting to do for a while. So I might go ahead and jump in on that. Let's go ahead and start our server here. This is a single command that's going to run our development web server. It's going to run a watcher for rebuilding our tracking script, and it's going to run a demo server that simulates the site that we're running the analytics on. And if we look at our web server here, this is listening on port 3000, so that's the port that we're going to want to open in our web browser. Got to give it a minute the first time because it has to dynamically build the web bundle in response to your request. Great. And then we log in with our test credentials here. Oh yeah, this should be, I think I set this to just foobar. Then we log in. Okay, so here is our app. And we don't have any data in here unless we go into a nice big look back window where we can see some of our test data sets from the past. So the main thing that we're going to start on right now is this look back window here. So this is an interesting thing because it automatically filters the data that we see. It also works on the events page. So this is a list of all of the events, event by event, instead of in aggregate form. And we can list, we can use the same look back window to filter this based on that. Okay, so we want this to be more like, if you've used Grafana, if you've used Sumo Logic or Datadog or whatever other online software as a service, or it doesn't have to be software as a service, but any kind of analytics tool where you're slicing and dicing data, a lot of times there's the ability to choose two types of lookback windows. There's a relative one, which is provided for convenience to say, show me the last 7 days from now. And there's also an absolute one, which you can use to say, show me, the 15 minutes starting on 4:30 p.m. Central Time on July 17th to, the 15 minutes after that or whatever. It can get very complicated. We don't necessarily need to make it too complicated though, but we do want to make this more effective and powerful than what it is. And it's been a little while here, so I actually need to remind myself of how this works. I think, so if we look at the lookback chooser here, it's setting the lookback as a number in our application state. And our application state, this lookback is just a number, and then that's going to be used when we're looking up our events, I think. Let's find the hook for that. Here. Yeah, so that's passed into this lookback query parameter, which then the backend is going to handle. So let's kind of build this from the inside out. We'll start with the backend functionality, and then we'll build up towards the front end based on how we expect things to go. So if we actually find the backend code that handles this, let's trace it through here just so we can make sure we understand what's going on. If we look at the API events route, it's taking this lookback query parameter and it's passing it to this get all events model function. So this is really the function that we're going to want to start with. Had to blow my nose there. Okay, so obviously to start with, this look back can't really be a number as a number of days because this doesn't really give us the granularity that we want. And in fact, it can't even be, say, a date. Well, say a number that's the number of milliseconds, right? I can type, right? Number. This is like a number of milliseconds. We could do that, but that still only allows us to do relative. We need to be able to do absolute look back windows, and that's going to require us to have basically two numbers or two dates that are passed into this function. And one of them can be optional, and it could default to now, basically. So let's have this look back number be continue to be what it is, and then we can add another one. We'll just call it look back end, which is also going to be a number. And we'll call this look back width, something like that. That sounds good. Okay. So what is this going to look like in terms of implementation? Our start time here is the thing that we're going to want to query on, right? So start time is going to need to be greater than start time. This is still right. And then we're also going to have a clause where and start time is less than end time. And this is a little confusing. So maybe we'll want to come up with some different names here. Start time is greater than look back start, and it's less than look back end, right? And so we kind of need to now calculate this look back start and look back end. So under this all, where we pass in our parameters, we're going to have look back start is something, and look back end is something, right? Now, look back end we already have, right? This is just going to be this number, look back end. And the interesting case here, though, is we're going to make this optional, and it's going to default to today, or now, I should say, right? So this could be look back end or date.now. Make sense? Look back start now is a little more interesting because our parameter here is width, which I feel like makes more sense than having it explicitly be start, but maybe it should actually just be start. Look back start. The difference being that width would be a duration in milliseconds, whereas start is the absolute timestamp of when it started. And it's not calculated based on look back end, it just is what it is. And that's a required parameter, so that will be just passed in as what it is. We don't need to do anything there. So this function actually got simpler. That's nice. But that's mostly because we're going to need to put a lot more of this logic on the client side. Let's now look at our server here. So we're going to parse two parameters now. We'll call them look back start and look back end, right? Simple enough. And this will be look back start, nope, start, and end. And here we're gonna, let's actually go into get all events. We can have this be number or undefined. And then over here we can say, okay, if this query param exists, then we're going to parse it. Otherwise, we're going to return undefined, basically, for look back end. And what are you complaining about here? And really, you know, calling this query params.get twice, maybe not the best, but I'm just going to leave it the way it is. Instead of trying to refactor it to use another variable, it just doesn't seem quite right. For look back start, we're actually going to say, we're just going to, let's actually do this. If not look back start, I was going to throw an error, but I feel like throwing an error is actually the right thing to do here. So let's do that. Throw new error. Or what's the way that we return an error response here? I feel like there's some throw new response. Throw new response. That does seem kind of weird, doesn't it? But throw new response must specify look back start query, or let's just call it parameter. Okay. And then here we can get rid of these question marks. Okay, so does that make sense? We've got our good look back start. And maybe I will actually put these in variables. So we could do like const look back start var or param equals this. And look back end param equals this. And then we can say it's going to help us avoid needing to use these exclamation marks here. Because now we can say, okay, hey, look back start is parse that. If it doesn't exist, throw an error. And look back end, we can just use this instead of doing the query params.get twice, like so. And I don't know if this necessarily needs to be on 2 lines or 3 lines anymore. Still does, okay. Okay, so pretty simple. We've got our look back start and look back end param, look back end. And then those are both getting passed into get all events. And look back end can be number or undefined, and look back start is just plain number. Cool. So what now? Now we need to update the client, right? We've updated the server. So now let's update the client to send our parameters back in the new format. Let's look at our dashboard hooks here. So this use events hook is the thing we care about. And here, we're actually going to need to do something in the app state. So this look back here, we could make this a data structure. And maybe we will do that. So let's go over here and just say look back is an object where start is a number and end is number or undefined. And so then this would be look back start is a number. And what would the default value for this be? I'm not sure. Let's just say date.now for now, which is basically a look back of 0. And end is going to be undefined. Okay. One sec. Okay, sorry about that. So we've got our look back, start and end, and that's in this default state. Maybe we should define a separate type for this. Export interface, look back, state, which is just going to be this. Look back state. Okay. So I guess if we, well, we'll just have to see. For now, this is fine. Let's look at our hooks. So in the hooks here, we've got our appstate.lookback. And really now it should be appstate.lookback.start and appstate.lookback.end. So if either of those two values change, the query key will be, we will get a new query key. So a little context on this. We're using TanStack React query here. So the way this works is if you do the same request twice with the same query key, it will use the cached value until that value is invalidated or a certain amount of time passes. It's configurable in various ways. In order for it to actually send a query when, say, we change to lookback.end, instead of just reusing the cached value, we need to have this value in the query key to say, hey, this is actually a new query that we're doing. Yes, it's technically the same route, API events, but the query parameters are different. It's going to return different results. It's a new query. Does that make sense? But if we were to change this back to a value that's previously been seen, it's actually going to go back to using the cached value for that key instead of doing an unnecessary query. Okay, so we'll just do and look back start, look back dot start. And then we could also do something here where we could say, if there is appstate.lookback.end, then we'll include that. Otherwise, we'll skip this query parameter altogether. Lookback.end equals this appstate.lookback.end. Right? And otherwise, this is just going to be an empty string. Oh, and I need a quote closing thingy. And then that is broken. Yeah, like that. Make sense? Great. Okay. So next we're going to do some work on the actual UI component here that's part of how these values are going to get populated into this state. And first I just want to reread this and make sure that I didn't mistype it here. So if appstate.lookback.end, then we include this string, including the and, otherwise an empty string. Yeah, so I think that's going to be kind of the structure for an optional query parameter if we have any more of those. Okay, great. Now we need to look at this lookback chooser itself, right? Because this is the thing that's actually going to handle setting these lookback changes. And currently we have this as a drop-down menu, but we're going to need to make a more complicated UI element. So let's go to shadcn, as we do. And what we're going to want is not a drop-down menu. I don't think. But we're going to want more of a pop-up. A popover. I think this is what we want here. So let's see. First of all, let's actually see if we have popover installed. We do not. So that's something that we're going to do. I'm just going to quit this server here, and I'm going to run the command to add the popover component. And while that's going, I'm actually just going to get started with this. So let's sort of copy the popover placeholder thing here. And okay, so now that's done. We should be able to add import from UI popover and then add all missing imports. And it's going to import all of our popover components here. And what is this render complaining about? I'm not sure. Is this some kind of versioning difference with ShadCN, I wonder? So one of the things I think newer versions of ShadCN are using like some kind of different headless component library on the back end, right? Like it's switched from Radix UI to like something else. I wonder if that's what's causing this to be different here or if it's something else. So what components do we have in our popover trigger here? Or what props? Popover trigger props. Container element, maybe? Maybe it should be container. But we might actually not need anything at all. So let's just start with this for a moment and just see what this looks like. So, oh yeah, got to restart my thing. Refresh the page. And wait for it to do its first build. Okay, so now we have our open popover button here. And really, I feel like I should just be able to put a button inside. And what's going to be the problem with that? Look back. There is no problem with that. That seems to work fine. We want this probably to be variant, I think outline. It's probably fine. And then in here, we'll probably call this like event look back. And we don't really need a description, I don't think. And then what goes in the content? Or where does the content go? I mean, not in the header, obviously. Just in the content below the header. Okay, that's simple enough. So in theory, we could put our form components down here, right? And what we're going to want to do is something kind of similar to this, where we have like probably some field groups or fields. What is field group again? Field group. I think we'd probably want field group. Let's just start there. So field group. Oh, see, so this is another example actually. we don't have a field group concept, I don't think. We have this form concept. This is going to be kind of annoying to have these docs out of sync with what I actually have available. How do I fix that? There, what I'm thinking is there's usually a way to see older versions of a docs site. Like this is the thing I was talking about. Base UI, I guess, is the new default component library. Um, Maybe I should do this migration thing, actually. But I'm going to wait for that until I'm done with this, at least this stage of work here. So what we're going to have instead of field group is, I think, form, if I recall. So let's just kind of look at what this looks like here, like this form item, form label, form control, blah, blah, blah. Okay, add all missing imports. And we will call this, so let's think about what we actually want here, okay? And maybe we could even make a little mock-up. I think I have a mock-up file, yeah. So, you know, we're gonna have some kind of dialogue, right? And it's gonna say at the top, look back. And then we're probably going to want some buttons for the most common things that you'd want to look back, right? Like minus 15 minutes, minus 1 hour, minus 1 day. Minus 7 day. And maybe we'll actually put these along the, or no, send it back. Along like this. Minus 7 day. Minus 30 day. And minus 365 day, which we might as well just call 1 year. Okay, so, you know, these will be buttons that you could push. We also might want to have the ability for a user to type something in, which would be kind of another, like a box with like a little, I mean, it doesn't really even need a little button, but this could be like minus 12.5 minutes or whatever the user wants to put in there as like a relative, you know, a custom relative value. And then what if we go back to arranging these vertically actually? And then this custom relative value. This we will put probably at the top, actually. Like that. Okay. And then we also want a section for absolute. And so over here we would have start time, and there would be like a date picker. And then we would do the same thing with end time with the date picker. Something like this, right? It's going to be a little complicated probably. Especially this is going to be complicated because it basically is a micro DSL here, domain specific language, which is to say human readable dates. We already see, maybe you don't need the minus in there, but you still need to be able to do like 12 minutes. What about 12.5 minutes? What about 12 minutes and 10 seconds? What about 1 year, 1 day, 3 hours and 5 minutes? It's like you can have these really complicated things. And I just don't really want to deal with that at the moment. So I'll probably not do this for starters. But we will do these buttons and we'll do the start time and end time date picker thing for now. And that'll be a good step, I think. Okay. So in order to do that, we're going to need some form items here for our start time and end time. So this would be like start time, and this would be like end time, right? And this input, now maybe we could use the form stuff, but I don't really want to think about that at the moment. These are actually going to be dates type. I think date time local. Yeah, that one. And let's just see what this looks like. These are obviously not wired up at all, but let's just see what they look like. The form item thing seems to require you actually be in a form. Is that right? It's kind of annoying. Or in a form control. Let's look at our site settings again here. This is one of the things I don't really like about ShadCN, and it seems like they kind of moved away from it maybe. There's this coupling of the presentational, like form label, form control, from the like functional wiring of the form. You know what I mean? Like it's basically assuming and built around the idea of using this use form hook. Is there a way to just do form control that doesn't require that? I don't know. For now, let's just actually not do that. Let's just leave form item out and form message and see what this does. Still doesn't work. Okay. Let's leave these out. See what that does. What? I'm starting to wonder if there's like some, like surely the labels don't need form, right? Okay, well, that works. So by using the browser's built-in datetime picker, we can kind of get some built-in functionality here that's nice. I don't know. There is a special date picker. It does look like it's specific for dates, which makes sense. So we're just going to stick with the built-in thing. So let's actually just implement this with our own little components here, right? So we could do like label, and this could be input name start time, and this could be label for HTML for start time, right? And then we could do the same thing for end time. End time. Okay, so now we've got our labels here. And I think if I inspect one of these labels, it should have the for attribute on it, right? Yeah, it does. Okay, great. And let's just put an ID on these as well. Okay. Is that what the for needs to like? Yeah. So now the label is like tied to the input here. You know, one of the interesting things, this is kind of an aside, but when I'm working or working on most of my other side projects, I'm usually using AI more and more these days. And switching back to doing this stuff manually for my stream, because I don't use AI on my stream, it really feels like weirdly difficult. Like I can feel that unless I continue to practice writing code by hand, it's like a skill that atrophies. So I guess that's just a call out that if you also write code, make sure that you keep doing it by hand every now and then, unless you want to lose the ability to do that altogether. At least that's how I'm feeling. So then let's go over here and look at the old version of this code. So we have these drop-down menu items that are doing this on-click thing. And I guess because they're drop-down menu items, we're not going to reuse that very much. So what we'll actually have is these buttons. And let's do a div here. Button. What is button group? Maybe that div actually should be a button group. Not sure. Variant is ghost. And just to give an example, we could call this one day. And we could say on click, handle, relative, look back, how do we want to organize these functions? So let's think about what this is going to be mutating. So we've got our app state. Let's make a function here. We can call it const update lookback. Async. And here we would have let's say update lookback start, new value number. And this is going to do something kind of like what we have up here. In fact, I might just uncomment this and copy it. and paste it here. And so this is going to say draft.lookback.start equals new value, right? And we're also going to have something to update the lookback end. And maybe this will actually take a start number and an optional end number. And it will set start to new value and end to whatever end is. Right? Something like that. So let me confirm here. If we go back to the server model function, which let's just find it this way here. So look back end date.now. Yeah, okay. So it is going to be defaulting in a value there. So really we don't want to set end to anything. So to use an example, this on click is going to be, let's just make a function here, update look back start, and this will be let's just do like const now equals date.now. And this is going to be like now. So kind of the thing that's concerning me as I'm doing this is, say we do this now minus, you know, a day in milliseconds, which would be like this is 1 second times 60 seconds per hour or per minute times 60 minutes per hour times 24 hours per day. Right? Like say we did that. Just put it in parentheses for readability and then Prettier gets rid of them. Okay, that's fine. The problem with this is this now is not necessarily now. It's the now when this component was rendered. So suppose a person opens the lookback window, waits an hour, and then clicks this now button. It's going to actually miss basically that last hour, or like your window is going to be wrong somehow. I don't really want to think too much about how, but it's going to be wrong. Anyway, so I feel like there's something to be said for having an option that's explicitly relative. Does that make sense? So let's go back to our lookback, our actual lookback app state here. We have start and end. And what if we have a one that's called like, we'll just call it relative. And this start is going to be optional, number or undefined. And it's going to be optional, and relative is going to be optional as well. And so for starters, we're actually going to probably default this to something like this. And relative is basically going to be this, right? Let's copy this, go back to our app state, and let's set the default for relative to this times 7. Okay. So what's the point here? The point here is the relative look back is going to continue to be the same, and we're not going to have to say update to start. Like if you select 7 days look back and then you go back the next day, it's not going to have to recompute the value of a start. The relative can just stay the same. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but I feel like this is going to make things a lot simpler. Obviously, we need to implement it on the back end, though, so we'll need to get to that as well. But for starters, let's just look here. And let's call this update lookback relative, actually. And this is actually going to set both of these to undefined. And then we're going to set relative to the number. Whatever that may be. Right? And then here, we don't need now minus. We're just setting it to 1 day's worth of milliseconds, approximately, right? You might be like, well, what about if there was like a leap second in that, day? I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to deal with that at the moment. We can maybe make it more perfect in that regard later by actually using a proper date time library. But for now, we're just doing it in this relatively simple way. Actually, let's take a look. So what library are we using here? I believe we already imported something, datafens. Yeah. So let's take a look at datafens and see if it has a format for durations that we can use. Where's the docs? Here. So there's distance. There's duration. Yeah, so we'll probably want to use this format for the duration, actually, I feel. The question is, can I actually use this to do math on dates? And the answer appears to be yes. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to want to use this duration object structure for our app state here, I think. And I wonder if we can import that. So relative would be duration. And we're going to import that from this. Yes. And so here, our relative is actually going to be days 7. And this is a much more expressive and useful way to represent what we're trying to say. And because we have the datefns function to actually do math with these structures, we're not going to ever have to coerce them to numbers ourselves, if that makes sense. So then here, this value will be a duration, actually. And we'll just set this to value. That's the same, right? Now we don't need it at the moment. So now this 1 day is just going to be days 1, right? And this guy here is going to be, say, days 7. 7 days. Okay. And we're going to do 30 days. Or what we could even do 1 month, right? Because we could do months. 1. And that would be like 1 mo. Because M is like minute and mo is like month, if I recall. And then 1 year would be years. 1. Cool. And then we'll also do some smaller values. So we're going to have, let's do 1 hour. Hours 1 and 15 minutes. Minutes 15. Right? Something like that. Okay, so now these should actually be semi-working. And this button here, we can actually put something in here that's going to be the rendered value for relative lookbacks. And we're going to implement the absolute lookbacks after we're kind of done re-implementing the relative lookbacks here with this duration concept. So lookback, and we would say format duration app state dot lookback dot relative. If it exists. Right? And in theory, if it doesn't exist, we would fall back to the absolute rendering, but we're not going to worry about that yet. Okay. The problem is, though, we've been changing our front end and now we need to update our back end. So let's go back over here. So now this lookback start and lookback end is not quite what we're going to want to do. Let's actually call this just start. We don't need to really say lookback. It just kind of takes extra characters. And we could do the same thing for start that we did for end here. Start, 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 right? And then we can also do this for duration. Relative. And this would be app.lookback.relative. Relative. But here we actually need to do format duration, because we need to convert this into a string, right? Why is it not finding that? Import format duration from the defense. Right? So I guess one other question is, can we parse durations? Like we've got format duration, right? Now can we parse them? I don't know. Gotta say, one of the things about data fence that I'm not a super huge fan of is this. Like, it's nice that you can use date objects and it doesn't have the overhead of like a whole separate object structure like Luxon or Moment does. But it's also kind of annoying that it's like, it's just missing stuff, I feel like. Like, it's like you can format the duration, you just can't go the other way. You can't parse it. It just doesn't exist. I do feel like we might want to do this actually, though. Format ISO duration. Or, I don't know. Let's just do it like this, I guess. Um, and we'll do format ISO duration. Cool. Okay, so that's good. We do also need appstate.lookback.relative in here. And theoretically, we shouldn't be mutating this relative. So I think this should work fine. It should be being replaced with new objects instead of being mutated in place, to be clear about what I mean by that. And in fact, we might just need this. Let's just try that and we'll just see how this goes. Okay. Mm-hmm. I've got an upset cat. Okay. So now let's implement the backend here. Might be a little tricky though, because we don't actually have a function to parse that duration. So we're going to need to write one ourselves. Which is kind of crazy. The more you think about it, you're like, okay, that's kind of crazy. Okay, so, and we can do events and then const events equals this. So what am I thinking here? Actually, let's just leave it how it was. What I'm thinking is we'll probably have two separate SQL queries for the two different versions of our get all events function. And this will probably accept lookback, which will be a lookback object, which I'm actually going to define here. So where's our app state? I forgot. Let's just get to it this way. Use app state. Oh, app.tsx. Okay, that makes sense. So I want to take this lookback state interface and I actually want to define it in a place where it can be used in both the client and the server, which is here. And then this is going to import that. So now if we go to our backend model function, this lookback will accept that actual lookback state object. And we're going to have two cases. We're going to say if lookback dot relative, then we're going to do something. Otherwise, we're going to do this. Right? And this is going to be lookback dot start, lookback dot end. Right? And I guess we would throw an error here. If not lookback dot start, or one sec. Okay. Gosh. This cat is in my face. He's not normally like this, but... Or not lookback dot end, we're going to throw an error. Throw new error. Invalid lookback. Oh my gosh. Hey, hey, come on. Yeah. Just be patient. You gotta be patient. I know. I know. Okay. So okay, one sec. Oh my gosh. I just kicked him out of the office. Okay. So basically what we're saying here is this lookback state has two situations in it. Either lookback.relative has to be set, or both lookback.start and lookback.end have to be set. And if one of those two things is not true, this is an invalid lookback window. Does that make sense? So then up here, let's rewrite this. Obviously, we're going to need to do something like start time is less than, or no, greater than some calculated thing, right? So we've got our duration, and we're going to need to remember to parse that, which I just forgot about and I just remembered. But we're going to do, I think there was sub duration. Sub. Date. Could do new date. And lookback dot relative. So this is going to be our starting time. Right? And so it's going to take new date, which is date.now, and it's going to subtract whatever our lookback relative thing is from that. And that's going to be this, and we can call this start time. Okay. So that's fine. What are we complaining about here? Start time, date. I guess it can't be a date. It needs to be a number. Get time, right? Yeah. Okay. So now our backend can handle that. The problem is populating this actual lookback object here. And that's something we're going to need to do in the server. So this will need to be lookback. Let's call it lookback. And we're going to have our lookback start param and our lookback end param, and those can still be populated the same way. Lookback equals start, and this we could type it as a duration. So we get some IntelliSense here. Start is going to be lookback start. End is going to be lookback end. And this is no longer required. So we're going to do the same thing for start that we've done for end here. And oh, that's not duration, right? This is going to be a lookback state object. So then we have a duration. And also in this state object, this should be optional too. Yes. Okay. So duration is going to be lookback duration. And this is going to be another kind of thing like this, but a little more complicated. So lookback end param, we're going to call this lookback duration param. And this one's just start, this one's just end, and this one's just lookback. Is that right? If we compare that to the hook, start, end, and relative, I called it. Right, that makes sense. Because that's what it's called in the data structure. It's good to be consistent about that. Lookback relative param. And then this lookback relative. This is going to be, if this param exists, then we're going to need to parse it, otherwise undefined. But we're not parsing it as an int, because this is returning a number, and what we need is a duration object. So we're going to actually need to do parse ISO duration. And this parse ISO duration function we're going to need to make. And we'll probably put this in a helper under date. Function parse ISO duration. And this will accept a duration string, return a string. And here's where we're going to need to do some figuring. Or no, this is going to return a duration object. Right? So maybe one way of doing this is with a regex. So let's do const parsed equals, just type a sample regex here, dot exec or match. I can never remember the functions for this. Duration dot match. I think is fine. And so we would have a thing here where it's like a number, so 0 to 9, and there could be one or more of those. And then there's going to be a string indicating the thing, right? Like, let's just copy this as an example here. So it seems to start with a P. So we would do like P, and then some number, and then Y, and then repeat this for everything else. But these are also in a capture group, and each of these is going to be, let's say, optional. I think that makes sense. So let's just do 2 of them, M, and let's try this out a little bit. So if we do node, and we do let duration equals p12y. This is going to return that. If duration is p12y1m, oh, I need to get rid of the let, then this has 12y1m, right? And if duration is just 1m, then we just get the 1m. Okay, so that seems to be working okay. And then we're going to add capture groups for everything else as well. So M, then there's D, right? That's not right. Y, M, E. And then it looks like there's a T in here. And then hours, minutes, and then seconds. Kind of a weird format, but fine. Fine, right? Okay, so we could do something like the match we don't need. What happens if we try to match this on something wrong? Duration equals on something that doesn't match, we get null. So probably I would do like dunk, dunk, dunk. Okay, so we have years, months, days, hours, minutes, seconds. Matches. So each of these is going to be assigned to one of these response match value things. And why? Oh, right. That's what I meant to do. Okay. Okay, so then we would return an object where it's years. And what's the format of duration again? Is it singular or plural? Oh, we can't even find it, of course. Import duration from date events. Yas. Okay. Yeah. Years, months, weeks, days, hours, minutes, seconds. So it is years. And this would be years. But years has that final character on it that we want to get rid of. And we could do that in our actual capture groups. Or we could just strip it off like this. Substring 0. Can you do -1 for that? Let's try this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, y dot substring 0, -1. That does not work. 0, 4, -1. That does work. So we would need to do years dot length -1. Okay. Do you enjoy writing CSS? Not really. No. The thing about CSS is that it's trying to solve a really complicated problem, which is the presentational layer of a UI. Like, this is notoriously a really difficult thing to express in a generalized way. So usually UI frameworks will either have a simplified set of options, like think old school Visual Basic, for example, where it's like you can only build certain UIs and they can only work a certain way, and that conventionality keeps it simple. Or you have something like CSS, where it's really like, we're giving you the ability to do anything you can think of almost. And you can see CSS Zen Garden for examples of some of the crazy stuff people would do with CSS. But because of that, it's like just this immensely complex and broad problem space. The other big problem with CSS is it's got these layers that have been added over time that really confuse me. Like, my brain gets mixed up between like the different names of things for, say, grid versus flexbox, where it's like similar concepts, but they have slightly different names. And the way that those kind of all interface with the rest of the box model, and just kind of the vast array of like options and layers of new things that they've added makes it kind of annoying. So I don't super enjoy reading CSS. But of all the UI frameworks that I've used, which to be fair is not really that many, I feel like CSS is competitive. It's not like it's unusually bad. It's just like normally bad. It's bad in the normal way that UI stuff is bad. And so here I'm actually going to do something to only populate these values if they exist. So here we're going to say like years. Otherwise, no. And what this is saying is if years exists, because like we see here that if a capture group isn't captured, it returns undefined. Then it'll go to this null case and we won't put years in the object at all. If it does exist, then it will put years in the object using this splat notation. This is just kind of a weird way of doing optional values in an object in a single expression without having to use if statements or something. But yeah, so we've got years, months, right? Which is just everything. Days, hours, minutes, and seconds. I guess I'll mention about the CSS thing. I do also use Tailwind CSS for this project, so I'm not actually writing CSS for this project, really. I'm using utility classes, which is similar. It's almost the same thing, but it's like maybe a little bit better, but it depends on what you actually like. Also, I just realized I forgot to do these. Okay. Okay, this looks good. And what are we complaining about here? He wants them to be numbers. Duration has them as numbers. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. So this would be parse int. I should have figured this out before I copy pasted them all, but that's okay. Let's just mechanically do this here. And then we're going to do 10 like this. Great. And it just exploded itself. Okay. Sorry, but I actually think it's time for me to go. Kind of an abrupt end, but I lost track of time. I've got some stuff I need to do tonight. I'll be back later. Or I mean another day. One of the things that keeps you from the front end, the other thing is JavaScript with its packages salad. Yeah, honestly, if you can stay away from the front end, it's not a bad idea. Like, there's a lot going on in the front end that is harder than the problems in the back end. At least for me. The back end, yeah, you've got security, you've got databases, you've got performance, stuff you don't have to worry about as much in the front end. But the front end has much more complicated state management, packages. The reason there's so many packages is because the problems are so complicated that you need packages almost to solve them. You can't really solve most of them from scratch. Of course, part of it is just the way the ecosystem is, some of it's essential complexity, some of it's incidental. And then CSS and HTML, which, they are what they are. They can be hard to deal with for sure. So that totally makes sense. I do have to hop off though. Sorry. Talk to you later. See ya.